Emery Jones is off to the NFL draft. So how does LSU replace 4 starting offensive linemen? We're talking about it. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Sage Ryan hits the transfer portal. Should we be concerned over the portal numbers? I want to give some context that suggests what's happening at LSU right now is happening everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. That's coming up in just a smidge. But on Thursday, the news came that we kind of all expected. Emery Jones declared for the NFL draft, meaning now LSU will, in fact, be replacing 4 of its 5 starters on the offensive line. It's not unexpected, but it is disappointing. If you've been here, and thank you to all the everydayers, we certainly appreciate you for being here every day. About 3 weeks ago, I told you there were 3 players that LSU was having conversations with that had a legitimate shot of returning. They were Mason Taylor, Emery Jones, and Harold Perkins. Well, Mason Taylor and Emery Jones have now both gone pro, and we're still awaiting word on what Harold Perkins will do coming off of the torn ACL. But late last week, kind of got the sense that Emery Jones had made up his mind and that this was going to be the decision. And coming into this season, we all anticipated that Jones and Campbell would head off to the NFL after being 3-year starters at their respective spots. And with Garrett Dellinger and Miles Frazier being out of eligibility, that LSU would be replacing 4 starting offensive linemen. So here we are. I want to talk about how LSU replaces this offensive line, both for the bowl game and then for next year. But first, appreciation for Emery Jones. This is a kid from, a local kid from Catholic High in Baton Rouge, chose to stay home, played for the Tigers. By the 3rd game of his true freshman season, he was starting at right tackle and never relinquished that spot. He was a true freshman All-American by ESPN. He was a 2-time second-team All-SEC performer as voted by the coaches. Last year in 2023, the LSU coaches named him the LSU Offensive Lineman of the Year over Will Campbell. And for Jones, it's a little disappointing because he was overshadowed by Will Campbell, because Will Campbell, as I've gone through, is arguably the greatest offensive lineman and had the greatest career in LSU football history. But even though Emery Jones was overshadowed by Campbell, he still had an amazing career as a 3-year starter. Emery Jones played in 38 games with 36 starts. After those first 2 games as a backup, he started every game the rest of the way for his career. Even this year, played injured. Injured his ankle against UCLA, and you could tell it lingered throughout the course of this season. But still incredible. As far as Emery Jones's decision to leave, prior to the season, there were a lot of mock drafts that had Emery Jones in the first round. And after this year, those are few and far between now. Mel Kiper, for what it's worth, on his latest big board, has Emery Jones as the 10th best offensive tackle. He is a likely day 2 pick, so around 2 or 3 guy. And one of the things when Emery was kind of deciding about maybe coming back is that the NFL wants to see him at guard. They think he might project as an interior player, which is fine. That's not uncommon. That good college tackles end up playing guard in the NFL. It's okay. That happens. But there's 2 things. Number one, you don't typically see NFL teams use a first-round pick on an interior offensive lineman unless it's a kind of otherworldly, sort of can't-miss type prospect on the interior. You're far more likely to see tackles go in round 1. For example, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year used their first-round pick on a center. It was a late first-round pick, but they anticipate being their starting center for a decade. The other thing, too, is if Emery Jones did come back, a lot of NFL scouts wanted to see him at guard. So if he comes back and kicks in to play guard, do you really improve your draft stock moving from tackle to guard? If you were moving from right tackle to left tackle, that's a different type of story. But I don't think that was going to be in the cards for Emery Jones. So disappointing for LSU, but probably the right decision for Emery Jones. So now you look ahead to this bowl game and to the 2025 season and sort of say, all right, what does LSU's offensive line look like? So I sketched it out, and here's what I came up with. So for the bowl game, the most important thing to find out first is whether or not Miles Frazier and Garrett Dellinger are going to play. Now, they're out of eligibility after the season, but both could play. And both are probably day 3 NFL draft picks or undrafted free agents. So they're the type of player that you would anticipate coming back or playing in the bowl game, because it's not like a Jaden Daniels situation a year ago or a Will Campbell this year where they're going to be a first-round pick and they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. So if those two guys come back, then this is easy. DJ Chester plays center, Dellinger and Frazier at guard, and then Tyree Adams is your left tackle and Weston Davis is your right tackle. So Weston Davis was a 5-star true freshman, flipped from A&M to LSU, played right tackle in fall camp, and they really like him. You talk to LSU coaches, they like Weston Davis a lot. I think he's a starter next year. And Tyree Adams this year was your 6th offensive lineman. Any of the 4 spots other than center, if somebody went down, he was going in. And when they were repping 1s and 2s in fall camp, Tyree Adams was Will Campbell's backup at left tackle. So in a best case scenario, if Frazier and Dellinger both play in the game, then you have Tyree Adams at left tackle, Weston Davis at right tackle, and you roll like that. Now, if the 2 veterans decide to opt out of the bowl game along with the tackles, then the only starter you have is DJ Chester. And, something they could consider is moving DJ Chester to guard, which may happen next year. So Cohen Eccles is another player highly regarded that LSU flipped from A&M. But Eccles is a true center. Chester may be a little big to play center. But if Eccles plays center, then Chester and Paul Mabinga can be your guards. And then Adams and Davis could be your offensive tackles. And that could be how it lines up next year. The other offensive linemen you have are Bo Bordelon, who this year was a rotational guy and really the jumbo tight end. And then 3 freshmen, Ethan Callaway, Ori Williams, and Kyrie Lee. And if we're being perfectly honest, those 3 guys have a long way to go. So, we've talked about wants, needs, and musts in the transfer portal cycle. How like running back is a want. I would put safety, defensive end, wide receiver, tight end. Those are musts. I'd put offensive line as a need, not the must that the other positions are that I just mentioned. But because I just laid out, you could have an offensive line next year with Adams, Mabinga, Eccles, Chester, Davis. It's a pretty good offensive line. But you don't have any experience there. So maybe you go into the portal looking for an experienced offensive lineman or 2. But 2 things to consider. Number 1, in 3 years in Baton Rouge, Brian Kelly has signed a total of 3 offensive linemen out of the portal. The first year, they signed Miles Frazier and Tremont Shorts. Frazier became a 3-year starter. Shorts never played. And then 2 years ago, they signed Mason Lunsford out of Maryland, and he never played. For the 2024 season, they did not sign a portal offensive lineman. And when you look up and down all the reports about portal players that LSU is hosting and courting, none are offensive linemen. Maybe that speaks to the fact that they're really confident in the guys they signed, the guys they have returning. I mean, you did add a heavy offensive line class in this 2025 signing class, including a 5-star that you flipped on signing day. So in Solomon Thomas. So maybe Brian Kelly feels better with his young, talented guys they've recruited than going into the portal for a veteran guy just to add a guy who's played football. Just something worth considering, but it's one of the reasons that bowl games, and not even the game, but the dozen bowl practices are so critical It's an opportunity for a dozen practices to try out all these different players, these different combinations, and then try it in a glorified scrimmage in the bowl game before you get into spring and then fall camp. It's basically like another spring practice. It's why there is tremendous value, not in playing a bowl game to try to get to 9 wins and win the Texas Bowl, but to go get a dozen practices with the guys going to the draft, with the guys opting out, so you have the young guys, the next guys, taking those reps. And offensive line could be a major beneficiary of these bowl practices. We'll, of course, follow it as we move through LSU's bowl practices. Okay, another day brought another player entering the transfer portal. Former 5-star Sage Ryan will play his final year of eligibility elsewhere. We'll talk about Sage Ryan's impact and how LSU replaces him next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. If you want to be in that number for LSU and Baylor, make sure you download the Game Time app, my favorite ticketing marketplace. Make sure you check out Game Time. I love it. With Game Time, you can use the app features listed in the customize your spot and go check that out right there. You can curate deals to make it easier to find the best prices. You can view your seats before you buy. They've got the lowest price guarantee. I love that. They guarantee you the lowest price. If you buy tickets through Game Time and find tickets in the same section and row for less, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. And you can see panoramic views from your seat. I love the all-in pricing feature. You got to turn that feature on, but when you toggle, it'll show you the final price, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. It's Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So, Emery Jones declares for the NFL draft. And a short time later, we learned that Sage Ryan is entering the transfer portal. This is probably not going to be a common opinion, but I think Sage Ryan became a convenient punching bag for LSU fans, a familiar target, and I think it was unfair. I have maintained for as long as Sage Ryan played at LSU that he was a great team player. Let me explain what I mean. So Sage Ryan came to LSU as a 5-star. He didn't ask to be labeled a 5-star, but he was. And anytime a player is labeled a 5-star, incredible expectation follow. Right or wrong, it happens. And so Sage Ryan showed up at LSU and people expected an immediate impact and a giant impact. And as a freshman, Sage Ryan battled hamstring injuries, and it cost him the majority of that season. He took a red shirt because he played in fewer than 4 games. And then he, again, a safety. And in 2022, Brian Kelly comes in, redshirt freshman Sage Ryan. And remember that year, Brian Kelly went in the portal and signed a whole bunch of veteran defensive backs. Jark Bernard-Converse, Mekhi Gardner, Greg Brooks, Joe Fouché. They loaded up on veteran defensive backs. So they slotted Sage Ryan in at nickel. He's not a nickel. He's a safety. So he spent his freshman year injured, sophomore year playing out of position. Then as a junior, when they missed on all those cornerbacks, Deuce Chestnut, Denver Harris, all those guys, Sage Ryan played boundary corner. He's not a cornerback. He's a safety. So in his first 3 years, he was injured, played nickel, and then played boundary corner. Finally, this year in 2024, Sage Ryan played safety. And I will grant you, the safety play at LSU was not good enough this year. But if you go look at Pro Football Focus, Sage Ryan was the 4th highest graded defensive starter this year. Braden Swinson was 1, Zy Alexander 2, Savion Jones 3, then Sage Ryan. He was ahead of Whit Weeks among starters. Sage Ryan played well. I didn't say he played good. I didn't say he was great. Didn't say he was all-conference, all-American. Didn't say any of that. I said he played well. He was a serviceable safety. Now, the other 2 players that played a lot of safety for you, Major Burns and Jordan Gilbert, were your 2 lowest graded starters on defense this year. Safety was a liability. But of your safeties, Sage Ryan played pretty well. Certainly played the best of the three. Now, last year, Sage Ryan went in the transfer portal, asked LSU for a big number. They were like, no, thank you. He went into the portal, tried to test the market, and the market was not robust. So he returned to LSU. After starting the season at safety in his natural position, there's probably going to be more of an opportunity. I don't know what the financial windfall or where Sage Ryan may go, but good luck to him wherever that may be. But I often say actions speak louder than words. You've heard me say that. And you can tell me you love Sage Ryan and Jordan Gilbert, Major Burns, whomever. But LSU is out actively targeting safeties in the transfer portal, and they should. Because when I went through my wants, needs, and musts, safety is a must because your safety play was very poor this year. You have to improve. Zechariah Poyser from Jacksonville State, he's considering LSU, Auburn, and Florida. According to a report from Steve Wiltfong over at On3, Poyser will visit LSU soon. He also anticipates taking visits to Auburn and Florida. The other big report from Steve Wiltfong over at On3 is the number one safety in the transfer portal is Dylan Thieneman from Purdue. He's going to visit Oregon, Ohio State, and now he's engaged with LSU as well. And the Tigers are on the short list. I don't know if LSU is going to land him, but this is one of those premier players. In 2023, he was a freshman All-American. The Football Writers Association of America named Thieneman the National Defensive Freshman of the Year. Remember, like this is a guy that plays the same position as Caleb Downs. I mean, Caleb Downs and Dylan Thieneman were both true freshmen in the same class, and Thieneman was named the Defensive National Freshman of the Year by the Football Writers Association of America. This year as a sophomore had 104 tackles, a sack, 4.5 TFLs, and 6 passes defended. Now, he's not committed to you yet. May not be. But the thing we consistently say about LSU so far in this portal cycle is their actions map to what Brian Kelly was saying, that they were going to be aggressive. Look around. You're projected to land Barian Brown. On3 rates him as the 7th overall prospect in the portal, the receiver. You had Will Helt, the Purdue defensive end, on campus Wednesday night. And then he's heading to A&M this weekend. Nick Anderson, the former Oklahoma wide receivers in the portal. Nick Anderson's expected to be on LSU's campus on Sunday. Jakeem Jackson, the cornerback from Florida, arrived on campus this week. He's projected to sign with LSU. The number one tight end in the portal is Max Clare. Shea Dixon is reported. He's the number 6 overall player in any position, number one tight end. He's a Purdue tight end. Max Clare expected to be at LSU this week. So the point is, you are going after the biggest names in the portal at positions of need. So you are doing the thing you said you were going to do. LSU is being aggressive in the transfer portal, going after the biggest names at positions of need. The question is, can you close them? Can you land them? Because if you land any of the guys that I just mentioned, and earlier this week, we also told you about Jacoby Matthews, the former 5-star who didn't play football this year, I'm told has been taking online classes so as to stay academically eligible to be able to play in 2025. And LSU and Ole Miss were teams on his list last spring. So maybe that's another player. The point is, LSU is showing you they are actively looking to get better at safety, at tight end, at defensive end. So at wide receiver, can you land these guys? That's the giant question moving forward. If you can, all of a sudden your roster looks like a contending roster in 2025 with Garrett Nussmeier coming back. But we started this podcast today talking about Emery Jones. LSU hasn't been in yet, at least not reportedly, on any big-name offensive linemen in the portal. To be determined if that does, in fact, happen. Of course, we'll keep you posted throughout. But Sage Ryan, the 16th player from LSU to enter the transfer portal. The Tigers have some big names in the queue. We'll see if they can land them. When I said that number, 16th player in the portal, a lot of you grit your teeth, roll your eyes, and say, what's going on at LSU? What's going on at LSU is what's going on literally everywhere, and I want to explain further next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. One of the biggest reactions I've gotten from LSU fans so far in this portal cycle is, what's going on? 16 players have hit the portal. Is Brian Kelly losing control of the roster? Is he losing the locker room? Why are so many guys leaving? Is the team falling apart? No. This isn't lip service. It's not intended to make you feel good. It's the reality. Last year, 25%, roughly 1/4 of all college football players enter the transfer portal. Nobody is immune. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody, not even playoff teams. Let me illustrate. So on Thursday, Boise State quarterback Malachi Nelson entered the portal. Now, if you love recruiting, you probably know that name. Malachi Nelson was the #1 overall prospect for the class of 2023, meaning he just finished his second collegiate season. Out of high school, he signed with Southern Cal. He was going to be Lincoln Riley's next big-time prospect. He was the heir apparent to Caleb Williams. Well, after one season in Southern Cal, he enters the portal, lands at Boise State. Loses the job competition this year at Boise State when Taylor Green left for Arkansas. And so he watched. And now Malachi Nelson is back in the transfer portal. Freshman season at USC, transfer portal, Boise State. Redshirt freshman year, Boise State, transfer portal. We'll see where he goes next. If you're an LSU fan and wondering, and there's 3 points that I want to make about Nelson, and they will all tie in to LSU. Number one is to illustrate that if you are worried about the LSU players going into the transfer portal, don't be. 1/4 of college football players go in the portal, meaning roughly 1/4 of your roster, 15 to 20 guys every year, are going to enter the transfer portal. That's just the nature of it. Nobody is immune. There are 12 teams getting ready to play in the college football playoff. One of them is Boise State. And Boise State's former 5-star quarterback is entering the transfer portal less than 2 weeks from Boise State playing in the playoff. And it ain't just Boise. Arizona State has 11 players in the transfer portal. The Arizona State Sun Devils that just won the Big 12 that are in the college football playoff with a bye. 11 players from Arizona State are currently in the transfer portal. Tennessee and Indiana, 8 players in the transfer portal. Boise State and Texas, one of the front runners, 7 players in the transfer portal right now. Ohio State with 5, Georgia, Notre Dame, Clemson, Penn State, Oregon, all with 3, and the fewest is SMU right now with 2. Every single playoff team has players in the portal, as many as Arizona State with 11. They're getting ready to play in the playoff. They've got 11 guys in the portal. Why? Because this is when the portal window is open. And the portal window closes at the end of December, so you could say, why not wait? See if you win your playoff game, advance. If not, then go in the portal. The problem is, it's like a game of musical chairs. You got to go in the portal because teams that need a quarterback, a safety, an offensive lineman, if you wait, what's to say another player in the portal doesn't take your spot at another place? And so by the time your season's over, and if you do go in the portal, if you can at that point, how many seats are left? How many prosperous NIL funds are still freely flowing? Or do you just have to take what's left? So guys are looking out for number one, not only at LSU, but at literally every program in college football, including the teams in the college football playoff. So that's number one. Like, let not your heart be troubled. I'm hearkening back to the Uncle Scone days last year with Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman Trophy when a lot of y'all saw he didn't win the Maxwell, thinking that maybe he wasn't going to win the Heisman. No. Come sit on Uncle Scone's lap. Like, let's have a conversation. It's not unique to LSU. It's everywhere. Guys enter the portal. You've got to adjust accordingly. That's number one. Number two, Malachi Nelson going into the portal further illustrates the dangers of overpaying for top quarterbacks out of high school. Lane Kiffin said it on signing day. And yes, this is relevant to LSU because of Bryce Underwood. And I'm not trying to make you feel better about the Bryce Underwood situation. I couldn't be more plainly clear. You want Bryce Underwood, of course you do. But you want Bryce Underwood to stay for 3 or 4 years. And Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss did not sign a high school quarterback this year. They didn't sign a high school quarterback. And on signing day, Kiffin said, paraphrasing, look at the 5-star quarterbacks. You spent a lot of money to get them. Most of them don't play year one, and then they leave. So you paid them a bunch of money and got nothing for it. That's the situation potentially that LSU is facing with Bryce Underwood. And so they went a different direction. Malachi Nelson's an example of that. This was a 5-star, the number one quarterback in the country, and he'll be playing in his third school in as many years coming up in 2025. Now, maybe Bryce Underwood becomes a 3-year starter, wins national championships, Heisman trophies, and is awesome. But history shows you it's more likely to go the other way, that he's going to sit and wait his turn, get impatient, and transfer. So let Malachi Nelson or Quinn Ewers or Dylan Gabriel or darn near any other quarterback in America be a test case to suggest you'd rather have transfer Jackson Dart. You'd rather have transfer Dylan Gabriel. You'd rather have transfer Riley Leonard. You'd rather have transfer Cam Ward than an overpriced true freshman who's not going to win for you in year one. Jackson Arnold is the best test case. I use it over and over again. Oklahoma, year one under Brent Venables, they were a 500 football team. They went and got Dylan Gabriel. They won 10 games. They told Dylan Gabriel, thanks, but we're turning this thing over to the kid, the 5-star Jackson Arnold. Dylan Gabriel goes to Oregon, where he's the quarterback of the number one undefeated team, and he's a Heisman Trophy finalist. Oklahoma had Jackson Arnold. They went 500. Benched Arnold. He got his job back. They finished 500. And now he's in the transfer portal. Experience matters. One of the pieces of evidence that is certainly illustrating itself, revealing itself, is veteran quarterbacks are a dramatically better option than overpaying for a freshman that's not going to play or not going to play well. So that's two things. One, everyone has guys in the portal. Two, Malachi Nelson's further proof of the dangers of overpaying for a quarterback out of high school. And number three, Nelson is the type of quarterback that LSU could target. I want to remind you this. While we haven't heard LSU connected to a quarterback formally yet, Brian Kelly said point blank, they're going to add another quarterback. And you have to. You have to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks. So do you wait to the spring window? Maybe. Is it portal? Do you try to flip a high school player for the class of 2025 that hasn't signed? I don't know. But Malachi Nelson, a player like Malachi Nelson, is a pretty good example of what could be there. A guy that was a highly regarded quarterback coming out of high school. It didn't work out at the place where he signed. He hits the transfer portal. Now maybe you look at a guy that could sit and wait behind Garrett Nussmeier in 2025 and compete to win the job in 2026. That's probably what LSU's looking for. As for Malachi Nelson specifically, I'll tell you last year, I personally fielded a call from someone associated with Malachi Nelson trying to push him toward LSU to see if LSU would engage in Nelson to get him here. And ultimately, they were good with where they were because they had so many eggs in the Bryce Underwood basket. I wonder now, hindsight 2020, knowing what happened with Underwood, if they might re-engage in that sense. But I don't know if Malachi Nelson's a fit for LSU now. In year 3, he probably wants to go somewhere where he can play. That's not going to happen because of what LSU has sunken into Garrett Nussmeier because he's the best option. But is there a player that's unhappy in the place where they signed, that jumps in the portal, that's willing to sit behind Nussmeier for a year with a chance to win the job in 2026? That's something worth keeping an eye on throughout this portal cycle because LSU's got to add a quarterback somewhere along the way. It may not be in this cycle. It may be in the spring cycle after spring football. The Tigers are going to add a quarterback. The quality and caliber of that quarterback will be very interesting to see. Okay, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks for making us your first listen. Now for your second listen, how about you go check out Locked On SEC with our guy Chris Gordy, available on podcast or YouTube. If you are listening on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.